My name's Mason, and this happened during my second year of college. After freshman year, I didn't land another dorm room, so I had to rush and find somewhere off campus. After a lot of scrambling, I ended up moving into a co-op, one of 3 old houses grouped together a few blocks from campus, close enough to walk, but still kind of out of the way. It wasn't great, but it was cheap, and that mattered more than anything. I had a bike, so the extra ride didn't bother me much. Most of the people living there were students around my age, though there were a few outliers. Some were former students, a couple were grad assistants, and a few were older adults going back to school later in life. But one person stood out right away, an older woman who lived in one of the neighboring houses. I guessed she was in her late 50s, maybe older, though it was hard to tell. Her hair was mostly gray, and she walked with a slight limp, like her back gave her trouble. She barely spoke and kept to herself, always wearing this empty, unreadable expression. I figured she had some tie to the university, maybe staff or a former student, but nobody explained, and I never asked. The first odd thing I noticed happened in our shared kitchen. It was strange from the start, since the other houses had their own kitchens, so I couldn't understand why she kept showing up in ours. She wasn't cooking or eating or chatting with anyone. She just stood there while the rest of us rushed around making dinner, laughing and playing music. She didn't try to join in. She just watched. A few times our eyes met, and I couldn't shake the feeling she was focused on me in particular, even though that sounded paranoid. No one else even acknowledged her, which felt weird too. Maybe they knew something I didn't. A few days later, I was in my room working on homework when I saw her again. I glanced out the window, and there she was, staring up toward the house. What made it worse was that she wasn't on the sidewalk. She was standing right in the middle of the street. It was late and cold, so she had to be freezing out there, but she didn't move. I couldn't tell if she was looking at my window or just the building, but it felt like her eyes were locked on me. For some reason, I gave her a small wave, just trying to be polite. The second I did it, I wished I hadn't. She didn't wave back. Instead, she started bouncing up and down like she was excited, then suddenly sprinted toward one of the other houses, probably hers. My stomach dropped. Not only had I acknowledged her, I'd basically confirmed exactly which room was mine. Later that night, I asked one of my housemates about her. He shrugged and said she'd always been around, and that everyone just ignored her. When I pressed for more, he admitted he didn't actually know anything. He was just repeating what someone had told him when he moved in. It didn't sit well with me, so I kept asking around. Eventually, one of the seniors from her house said she was loosely connected to the university, and a bit eccentric, but not dangerous. When I asked why nobody thought her behavior was strange, he said the tenants didn't get a say in who lived there. That was up to the property manager. It wasn't a satisfying answer, but there wasn't much I could do. So I tried to forget about her. Then things got worse. One night, I stepped out of my room and almost collided with her. She was standing right outside my door in the hallway. I actually jumped back because she scared me that badly. It was after midnight on a weekday, so the house was completely quiet. She didn't say a word, hardly reacted at all. She just turned around and walked off, like I was the one bothering her. There were a few more moments like that. Times when I'd catch her wandering places she didn't belong, or poking around where she had no reason to be. Little things that piled up and made my skin crawl. Around that time, I realized my room key was missing. The 3 houses used to be part of an old hotel, so every room still had its own lock. Most people didn't bother locking their doors, but I couldn't relax unless mine was secured. So losing that key stressed me out. I had a spare, sure, but replacing it meant spending money I didn't really have. A few nights later, I woke up out of nowhere in the middle of the night. I didn't know what woke me at first. Then I heard it. Every 20 seconds or so, there was a soft thud coming from my closet. A dull, uneven bump. like something shifting around behind the door, like something alive was moving in there. I don't scare easily, and I'm not the type to freeze up when something feels wrong. So I decided to handle it myself. I slid out of bed, took a slow breath, and crept across the room, trying to keep my footsteps quiet. My chest was pounding so hard it felt loud. In one quick motion, I yanked the closet door open and let out this wild, half-fake scream to psych myself up. She was inside. The woman. One of my ties was wrapped tight around her neck, and her eyes were stretched wide, unblinking. In one hand, she gripped a kitchen knife. Before I could even process what I was seeing, she rushed me with the blade pointed straight at my chest. This time, the scream was real. Pure panic. I slammed into her, and we crashed to the floor. She was small and frail, so I managed to knock the knife out of her hand pretty quickly. But that didn't make it any less terrifying. She fought like crazy, kicking, scratching, even biting. Screaming the whole time while I struggled to hold her down. I shouted for help. Doors flew open down the hall. My buddy Alex got there first and helped me pin her arms. Someone else called the cops. After that, everything felt foggy, like my brain couldn't keep up. The police showed up fast and arrested her right there. By then, she'd gone completely quiet, just staring straight ahead, refusing to say a word. That silence honestly scared me more than the screaming. They searched her and found my missing key in her pocket. No surprise there. A few weeks later, we finally learned the truth. She turned out to be the landlord's sister. He'd secretly let her stay in one of the empty rooms instead of getting her real help. She had serious mental health problems, and he'd basically just hidden her there. Eventually, he got charged for negligence and a bunch of other things. And honestly, I blamed him way more than her. I felt sorry for her in a way, but that didn't change the fact that she'd tried to kill me. I could have died that night. I still don't know why she fixated on me, and I don't think I ever will. I'm graduating soon, and while I'll miss college, that place will always remind me of that night. It's burned into my memory. This next story isn't exactly mine, but I saw most of it unfold, so it stuck with me. I've lived in a small 2-story house with my husband Daniel for almost 20 years now. Our kids are grown and scattered all over the place, building their own lives, and we couldn't be prouder of them. What happened took place last year. Someone finally moved into the house across the street, which felt nice after staring at an empty place for months. Being retired, I spend a lot of time on the front porch, knitting, reading, soaking up the sunshine with my husband. Sometimes, I play music out there. Other days, I listen to those crime podcasts for hours. It's just part of my routine. The new neighbor was a young man, probably mid-20s. He drove a sleek Mercedes and wore flashy clothes, the kind that made you think he either had serious money or was trying hard to look like he did. But honestly, he was kind, really polite. After a few days, he came over and introduced himself. His name was Tyler, a few years out of college. Sharp, friendly, easy to talk to. He and Daniel hit it off right away, joking around about sports and swapping old college stories I'd never even heard before. Tyler said he worked in entertainment, doing freelance projects for some big online creator. I didn't totally understand what that meant, but it must have paid well. He definitely looked comfortable. He even started chatting with Daniel about stocks and different investments he was making, like he had everything planned out. Overall, he seemed like a decent kid. Quiet, polite, always smiling. For a few months, everything felt normal and peaceful. Since I spent so much time on the porch, I'd see him heading out most days. He'd give me a little wave, and I'd wave right back. It became part of our routine. At some point, I started noticing a young woman visiting his place pretty often. She drove a small white convertible and definitely turned heads. Blonde, stylish, the kind of girl you'd expect to see on someone's arm at a fancy restaurant. To be honest, her outfits were a bit bold for my taste, but that's just me showing my age. I assumed she was his girlfriend. She had a key, after all, so it made sense. Once or twice a week, her car would pull up while he was gone. She'd let herself in, stay for a while, then leave. I never really understood what she was doing there alone. But young relationships are different these days, so I kept my opinions to myself. Then one evening, I finally saw them together. He drove into the driveway with her sitting in the passenger seat, laughing about something. That settled it in my mind. Definitely a couple. But not long after that, things started to feel tense. One afternoon, I was outside trimming my flowers when I heard shouting from across the street. They were standing in the driveway, arguing. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. She was flailing her arms, practically spitting her sentences at him. For a second, it looked like she might actually hit him. Eventually, she stormed off, slammed her car door, and sped away. He just stood there for a moment, rubbing his face, then went back inside like nothing happened. I don't even think he noticed me watching. I told myself it was just a couple's fight. Everyone has those. It wasn't my business to interfere. Still, after that, I kept seeing her car at his place when he wasn't home. Over and over again. It nagged at me. I mentioned it to my husband, Arthur, and he gently told me not to snoop. Said it wasn't right to pry into the poor guy's life. And he was right, of course. So I dropped it. Then came the night everything fell apart. We were dead asleep when sirens tore through the quiet. Loud, urgent, too many to ignore. We threw on robes and hurried outside with the other neighbors to see what was happening. His house was surrounded. Police cars, flashing lights, even an ambulance. The whole street glowed red and blue. A few minutes later, officers came out with that same girl in handcuffs. She wasn't fighting or crying. She just walked forward calmly, staring straight ahead like nothing mattered. Then they brought him out on a stretcher. He was covered in blood. I actually gasped. It didn't even look real. We didn't see him for almost a week after that. I worried the entire time. When he finally returned home, Arthur and I went over to check on him. He invited us in and told us the whole story. Her name was Marissa, apparently, and she'd confessed right away. Made everything easy for the police. Turns out she was never supposed to have a key. She'd stolen his spare and secretly copied it. After a while, she started pressuring him for expensive things. Fancy trips, jewelry, pricey dinners. When he hesitated, she got jealous and controlling. That's when their relationship started to crumble. All those times she'd shown up while he wasn't home. He had no clue. She'd been tracking his location through his phone. I didn't even know that was possible. She'd gone through his belongings, snooped through everything. Worst of all, she'd hidden tiny cameras in his bedroom. Whenever she stopped by alone, she was just checking the devices, swapping batteries, making sure they were still recording. The fight I overheard was him trying to break things off. She refused to accept it. He settled on taking a break just to calm her down. But she'd already seen everything through those cameras. The next night, she came back with a knife. You can imagine the rest. Somehow, he managed to fight her off, but not before she seriously hurt him. The doctor said he was dangerously close to dying, inches away. We tried to comfort him, but he looked shaken to his core. Before we left, he sighed and said he'd learned not to flash his money around anymore, especially not around the wrong people. Not long after that, he moved away. Said he didn't feel safe in that house anymore. Said she had friends just like her, and the thought of them knowing where he lived scared him. We never saw him again. I still hope he's doing all right. Nobody that young should have to survive something like that. When I moved into my new place, all I wanted was a clean slate. I won't get into the messy details. But let's just say, an ugly situation with an ex made it impossible to stay in my old city. I'd made some money early on, and honestly, I'd surrounded myself with the wrong kinds of people. Hard lesson learned. The new neighborhood felt perfect. Quiet streets, hardly any crime, mostly families with kids running around. The houses were spaced far apart too, which I liked. Plenty of privacy. Except for one thing. The property right next to mine sat way closer than the others, and the house itself was massive. The first time I saw it, I figured it had to belong to a huge family. I imagined grandparents, cousins, the whole crowd. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Even though I tend to keep to myself, I didn't want to be the weird neighbor who never says hello. So I decided to introduce myself around the block. For some reason, I saved the house next door for last. No clue why. Everyone else I met was nice enough. Friendly, polite, the typical suburban parents. Still, they all seemed very put together and successful, which was a little intimidating. I wasn't sure how a single guy in his late 20s was supposed to fit into a neighborhood full of families, but that was my own insecurity talking. By the time I finally walked up the driveway next door, my social energy was completely drained. I almost went home, but I knew if I did, I'd never come back out. So I just forced myself to knock. I expected someone middle-aged to answer, maybe a dad in business casual or something. Instead, the door opened, and this young guy with a mullet stared back at me. He honestly looked younger than I was. It caught me off guard for a second. I launched into my little, "Hey, I'm new here" introduction. But he cut me off with this huge grin. He joked about how it was nice to finally meet someone born in the same decade. I laughed and admitted I'd been feeling out of place surrounded by minivans and toddlers. He told me not to stress, said most people kept to themselves anyway, which was actually comforting. He said his name was Logan and told me I should come by for a drink sometime. Half joking, I said, "Why not now?" expecting him to laugh and wave me in. But he didn't. He glanced back over his shoulder like he was checking something inside, then turned back and said he couldn't. He was working. When I asked what he did, his smile faded just a bit. After this awkward pause, he just said, "Finance," and left it at that. No details. Something about the way he said it felt closed off. I asked if he had roommates, figuring a place that big had to be shared. He said no. He lived there alone. That honestly blew my mind. The house was enormous, way too big for one person. We talked a little longer, nothing special, and he gave me his number before heading back inside. I walked home feeling kind of excited that someone my age lived next door. He seemed chill enough. Still, the whole thing felt a little strange. That was about 6 months ago. For the first few weeks, nothing really happened. I texted him a couple times to hang out, but he always said he was swamped with work and apologized. Eventually, I stopped trying. Not out of anger, more like, if you're not interested, that's fine. I'm not chasing anyone down for friendship. What really got to me, though, was this. I never saw anyone come or go from his place. No guests, no parties, no dates, nothing at all. I never once saw him order food, which was weird. No delivery drivers, no grocery runs, nothing. His car stayed parked in the driveway like it never moved. Honestly, I had no clue how the guy even ate. It was like he survived on air. He lived so quietly, so invisibly, he might as well have been a ghost. I work from home, and my office is up on the 3rd floor. From my desk, I can see straight into his yard. That's how I noticed all this stuff. And yeah, I know how that sounds. A little nosy, maybe even creepy. But his house was literally right there in my line of sight, just past my monitor. Sometimes I'd glance over without even thinking about it. Then one night, a Wednesday, I remember that clearly. Something finally broke the routine. I jolted awake around 2 in the morning to loud music blasting somewhere nearby. I sleep with the windows open, so the sound carried straight in. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, one of those super realistic ones that mess with your head. But then I listened harder. It was definitely real. I got up and looked out the window. His driveway was packed. 6 and maybe 7 cars lined up bumper to bumper. There was no mistaking it. He was throwing a party. Now, I'm not some grumpy neighbor who calls the cops over a little noise. I've been to plenty of parties myself. But this was the middle of the week, and it sounded like a full-on nightclub. So I figured I'd walk over and just ask him to turn it down a notch. Simple. I pulled on a hoodie and headed across the yard. Even from outside, it sounded wild. Shouting, laughing, music pounding through the walls. Definitely a party. I knocked. No answer. I thought about texting him, but knew how that would go. He'd ignore it and feed me some lame excuse in the morning. So I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I tried the handle, expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. The door just swung open. Right inside the entryway was a pile of shoes, at least 10 pairs, maybe more. Sneakers, boots, dress shoes. Like a bunch of people had kicked them off before heading inside. But the place was empty. No voices. No people. No drinks on the counter. Nothing. Just a completely bare house. I could still hear the noise, though. Laughter, yelling, glasses clinking. It echoed through the place like a real crowd. Then I really listened. It wasn't live. It was a recording. Just a loop of party sounds playing through speakers. Fake laughter. Fake chatter. Fake everything. My stomach dropped. If the party wasn't real, then whose shoes were those? And whose cars were outside? People were definitely there. They had to be. That should have been my cue to leave. Any sane person would have walked right back out. But I didn't. I needed to know what was going on. I moved quietly through the house until I noticed a door cracked open near the back. When I pushed it, I saw stairs leading down into a basement. Something in my gut told me that's where the answers were. It was almost completely dark down there, except for this faint glow coming from somewhere deeper inside. I knew I shouldn't go down. Every instinct said turn around. Still, I went. Step by step, slow and careful. When I reached the bottom, I could see the light coming from another room farther in. And that's when I heard it. A new sound under the fake party noise. Low. Mechanical. A heavy, grinding hum. Like machinery chewing through something. Like a saw. I edged closer and peeked through the crack in the door. 3 men stood inside, all older than Damon by a lot. They wore thick work clothes, heavy gloves, and protective goggles. And they were all staring at something across the room that I couldn't see. I noticed something else that didn't sit right. All 3 of those guys were wearing heavy work boots. Thick, dirty ones. But upstairs, I'd just seen that pile of regular shoes by the door. Sneakers, loafers, casual stuff. It didn't add up. If this were any normal situation, I would have guessed they were contractors or something. Late-night repairs, maybe. But nothing about this felt normal. And whatever they were staring at across the room, it was out of my line of sight. I couldn't see it, no matter how much I leaned. After a few seconds, another thing hit me. The smell. Strong. Sharp, like bleach or industrial cleaner. The kind of scent that burns your nose. That's when my gut dropped. I can't explain it, but this wave of dread just washed over me. Like something deep inside was screaming that I shouldn't be there. Like my life was actually in danger. So I turned around, moving as quietly as I could. Slow steps, no sudden noises. But halfway back to the stairs, the light behind me dimmed, like someone had just closed the door to that room. I didn't hear it over the fake party noise, but I felt it. And that was enough. I bolted. I sprinted up the stairs, through the house, and out the front door without even looking back. My legs were moving before my brain could catch up. I didn't go straight home either. For some reason, I hopped my fence and cut through the backyard like I was being chased. Slipped in through the side door and locked it fast. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. But one thing was clear. Under no circumstances could Damon or those guys know I'd been inside. I went upstairs to my office, turned off all the lights, and crouched below the window. Then I slowly peeked over toward his place. At first, nothing. The house looked dead. Then the front door burst open. Like 8 men poured out all at once. They spread out, scanning the yard, the driveway, even the street. Like they were looking for someone. Looking for me. And Damon wasn't with them. These were all older guys, just like the ones I'd seen downstairs. A couple of them started arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but it looked heated. One even shoved another like they were about to throw punches. Eventually, they all went back inside. A minute later, the noise stopped completely. The fake party went silent. I just stood there, staring, trying to process everything. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even report? Loud music that wasn't playing anymore? A weird smell? Some guys in a basement? None of that would sound real. And if the police showed up, Damon would know it had to be me. None of the other neighbors reacted at all. Not a single porch light turned on. No complaints. Nothing. How had they not heard it? And those shoes. That part really messed with me. Every guy I saw wore boots. So who did those other shoes belong to? Why leave them there? I had too many questions and zero answers. Eventually, I just gave up and went to bed. The next morning, I checked outside first thing. Every car was gone, including Damon's. I tried to work, but it was pointless. I kept glancing over at his house every few seconds like I expected something to happen. After a while, I went for a walk, partly to clear my head, partly to casually peek through his windows. Nothing. No movement. No lights. Days went by. Still nothing. His car never came back. I started feeling like I was losing it. So I asked a few neighbors straight up if they'd heard that party the other night. Every single one of them looked at me like I was crazy. They said they hadn't heard a thing. Even after I explained the time, the house, the music, nothing. That was months ago now. And here's the part that really gets me. He still hasn't come back. The grass is overgrown. Packages are piled up at the door, untouched. No one's maintaining the place at all. It's like he just vanished. I keep telling myself maybe it's nothing. Maybe there's some boring explanation. But who goes to the trouble of faking a party with recorded sounds unless they're hiding something illegal? And if they were that careful, how did they forget to lock the front door? Maybe that's what those guys were arguing about. I don't know. The whole thing makes me feel paranoid, like I'm stuck in the middle of something bigger than I understand. If Damon ever comes back, I honestly don't know whether I'll pretend nothing happened or walk right up to him and demand answers.